So in this video, I want to talk about a topic that comes from not the actual main light novels itself. This is a side story that the author wrote as a bonus, which is to do with, it's basically pre-Overlord, where it is Irons and his guildmates doing activities in the game. And there's some discussions about the actual game Yggdrasil, and one of those is that only 30% of the world of Yggdrasil was ever discovered. And I've talked about this in a previous video a while ago that's not on this channel anymore, about this very component, and I've seen many comments of people discussing about how this doesn't make sense. And I want to discuss about how it could possibly make sense that a MMO is only 30% discovered. And I'm going to go over some game mechanics designs, just some different perspectives, and again, you don't have to agree with me, but I'm merely just looking at the possibilities of how it could work and looking at the devil's advocate of how a MMO could be designed that only 30% of it was ever discovered from a map standpoint, like the world itself. So one of the things that I'm first going to talk about is something that I'm sure many are going to roll their eyes at, and that is Minecraft. Now, understand that I'm merely talking about the game design and the systems behind it, not whether you like the game or not. Minecraft is a game where it is randomly generated world, where you start the world and every time you regenerate it, it creates a new map. Zones are in different places, trees are in different places, caves are in different places. And there are other games like that that are designed with random generations. Valheim, which is a game that only was recently released, which is designed in a similar system. I would suggest looking up what Valheim is, which kind of funny because Yggdrasil, Valheim, the games kind of have a bit of a connection when it comes to their naming, but that is also another game that's based on a Viking that's gone to the afterlife, and the entire world is randomly generated with different assets. And so one of the things that I kind of wonder is if the author is trying to imagine a MMO that the world map is maybe randomly generated. Now, it depends on the amount of random generation, because you could go full randomized where the oceans are randomized, the rivers are randomized, mountains are randomized of where they're being placed, or you could have it designed in a sense of you tell the system where you want mountains, where you want forests, where you want swamps, oceans, rivers, etc., and then the system would then place those assets there and randomize it slightly, like where the placements of each individual tree, rock, sort of curves, etc., like where all those little things are. So you could, at least if you design the map to be a specific design, say like you were basing it on a real world area or a different game or just some inspiration, at least then the machine would then create it like that. That is two ways you could go about it. You could go full randomize or you could go partial randomize. The thing is though, is that depending on the amount of randomization, you still, either with those, you still need to create the assets necessary regardless. It's just you're choosing how you want to go about it. The end result, either way, if you go either or either, you would still have to create the assets itself. So the trees, the rocks, the ores, the mountains, you at least need to have some type of system in place that it at least knows what each different asset needs to go in each different location, and create enough assets that it allows for that randomization. Another game that has randomization, but not to the same degree, would be Diablo. Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 have randomized dungeons where they place different tile sets connecting together. Again, it's not how I imagine the world of Yggdrasil is made in the author's eyes, but it merely demonstrates the point of randomization can be done in different scales. And so is there a possibility that the author's mind of this randomized world in Yggdrasil is kind of like that, where the most that the actual developers would have done for Yggdrasil is create the systems. So creating the crafting system, the races, the spells and abilities, the passives, and the art assets themselves, buildings, objects, etc., and then use some type of machine coding that creates it randomized, but again, depending on the scope of it, depends on how much is randomized. Maybe it's only the actual zones themselves. Just go, okay, I want a forest here, water, ocean, etc., randomize those opponents, but preset where you want them regardless. Or it could be completely randomized, or do they even randomize the dungeons as well? Or do they place those, create the dungeons, etc., and then put them there? The thing about the whole idea of dungeons not being randomized is that seems like a lot of additional work if you're making the world so vast that only 30% of it's been discovered, because unless there are entire massive areas that are just endless fields that maybe you could place dungeons in, you could build your own dungeon, maybe that's possible, and that's maybe what the author had in mind. Or maybe there is also some randomization in where temples, dungeons, caves, etc. have been placed. And again, that comes down to the level of scaling of randomization. I know it's kind of getting into the deep sort of weeds of game design itself, but I found it kind of fascinating when seeing people discuss about it, and that particular side story, and saying how it's not realistic that an MMO could only be 30% discovered. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that people look at MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV, and particularly also World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is one of the big popular MMOs that's been around for the dawn of time, and yes, I have played World of Warcraft. I've played it a lot back in my old days, and developers would create everything. Every single asset and every single placement of rock would be done by a developer, right down to where every single tree, every single rock, every single bridge, every bush, you name it, would always be placed. I believe that if an MMO of the future would at least need some randomization, how far you would go would completely depend on how well you could scale a system, because again, the more you randomize, the more the machine needs to create, but at the same time, you would only need to do it once. Once it's done, then you just load it up. And I do believe, now quote me if I'm wrong, there's another MMO out there called EVE Online. For those that don't know, it's basically spaceships going through the galaxy, well, a solar system, not a galaxy, but through a solar system, not solar system, through a galaxy, through a galaxy. I was thinking even bigger than that, but through a galaxy that has many different solar systems, planets, moons, suns, etc. And I do believe that the developers for EVE Online did use a machine to create that entire galaxy as well, and so that they can just expand it whenever they desire, and the machine kind of places it randomly and adds connections. It can work like that. It just be randomized. At the same time, if you have something like Yggdrasil and you did randomize it and then there were issues, well, it's no different than any other normal MMO. As people play through it, test through it, they might find glitches and bugs, then they just report them to the developers and they go find that exact location on a gridlock and then just fix that glitch or bug when needed. I know some people will use the excuse a complete randomized world would come with heaps of bugs and stuff like that, but let's be completely honest here, most games these days get shipped with so many bugs it ain't even funny to begin with glitches that just completely break the game itself. So maybe that's kind of the idea of just patching it as it goes along, and that could take maybe 5 years down the track, someone discovers a new location and there's a bug there. Or maybe they just came up with a system in the writer's mind that was just not with those glitches or bugs. It's merely just a theory on how game design would work from that standpoint of the author's mind, and I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What scale do you think that could work in? Would it be completely randomized, or would it be partially randomized, especially with the dungeons themselves? Because the actual dungeon that Irons and the guild went through, they ended up changing it because they ended up taking it over and turning it into their guild building, and then they redesigned it as they see fit. So I do feel like some of those dungeons would be randomized. How randomized though, and even if the bosses were randomized in the sense of spells and abilities and that kind of stuff, it all just depends on the author's mindset. But I don't think we'll ever find an answer to that question because the author's very much looking at finishing off the story very soon, so I feel like we will never really have an answer to that question, because it's something that I really enjoyed reading, was those side stories that weren't part of the light novels that went into pre-Overlord with the gaming days, because I love that kind of thing. So it's disappointing. Maybe one day we might get lucky and the author might come back and write some stuff about it, but we'll just have to wait and see. So again, I'd love to know your thoughts about this particular topic, because it is a bit of a different topic when it comes to just talking about the new world, rather than I'm kind of going to Yggdrasil itself and that connection there. So again, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more anime content, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.